Ex-prisoners of Reddit. What was the worst thing you saw inside the prison walls?
I worked in the medical department of a large prison in Florida. We had an inmate bite a bigger inmate's nose off the tip. The bigger guy kept asking the kid for sex and the kid had enough. We saw several stabbings, several were life-flighted out, but those weren't the most interesting. We had an inmate smoke some bad spice, made out of God knows what. He came to medical out of his mind and later died because it caused brain hemorrhaging. One guy got a dislocated patella and was just sitting patiently as I got his info. I asked if it hurt and he said yeah. I asked how he was so chill and he replied, because I am not a B-word. Oh yeah, I forgot the guy that got a stick of deodorant stuck up his ass so far we had to send him out to have it surgically removed. He said he was practicing for sneaking in a cell phone but there's a 50 chance he was using it as a dildo. Inmates were very creative with their homemade dildos.
Asking for sex.
Patella kneecap, for those who don't want to Google it like I just did.
There was talk about a guy assaulting his own daughter. Some guys made him a cup of morning coffee. Morning coffee is basically taking a kettle, pour cooking oil in it, heat it up and add a lot of sugar and then throw it in someone's face. It was very uncomfortable to see and hear. Edit whoa. First comment to really blow up like this.
I've noticed from these comments that when people do what you described they add large amounts of sugar. Why is that? Is it because the concoction becomes like syrup and hard to remove?
Ignorant question, but how do people have access to boiling water?
I always find it interesting that among all kinds of criminals, the child molesters are the most hated by everyone. As they should be, of course, but interesting that even murderers will be like you, child molester, are the lowest of creeps.
Done 11 years myself. One of the worst things I've seen is two members of a gang called Goodfellas aka 40 Deep jumped on a blood on the way back from pill call. One used a large knife, the other had a fan motor in a net bag and used that as a flail. Also seen heard multiple people being raped. A friend of mine admitted to me after a year or so that he had been actively raped every night by his roommate OOOG from the Bloods for about a 5-month period. There's more just what I could think of ATM.
That seems like a very animalistic and unsafe life. Yep, that's the nicest way I can voice my reaction to what you wrote.
OOOG from the Bloods. What's an OOOG?
11 years for being a serial killer ain't bad.
What did you go to prison for, Zodiac Killer?
Not prison but jail. 6 months pregnant and her water broke. COs didn't believe her and waited to take her to the hospital until she was hemorrhaging. The baby died and the woman was released because they didn't want to pay medical costs. This was 2004-ish.
Wow, that's fucked up.
So cruel and so unusual, prison systems punish people in ways indescribably disproportionate to the crime committed.
There was no reason for that. We had a pregnant female and once she found out that we sent her straight to the hospital for every pain she abused the F out of it. But none of us, rightfully so, want to F around when it comes to babies. Why do I give AF who's paying for it? All they need for me is to call the doc, get orders to send her out and my part is done. This situation should have never happened to this poor woman.
That's heartbreaking. This should be grounds for a lawsuit and a manslaughter charge.
I spent 8 years in prison, in the state of Georgia. There was a guy who made a hustle of hiding illegal cell phones for the Mexican gangs. When a shakedown search occurred, this man was responsible for the loss of many of those cell phones. He was confronted on the yard, and tried to escape by climbing the fence. He got stuck in the razor wire, shredding his forearms, while 7 or 8 Mexican gang members were stabbing him all in the back of his legs and his ass.
That's the gang mentality that I find to be the most bullshit. You tell this guy to hold onto these phones for cigs or whatever. He agrees, you then proceed to give him way more contraband than he could possibly hide. It gets found, he's probably getting time in the hole, the Mexicans get off scot-free, but they still want revenge on the guy.
God, I am already scared as poop of being stabbed. This is my worst nightmare. Edit changed from to of.
What? No. They should have been happy he was taking the blame for the phones, not mad at him for losing them.
I've never been to prison but my cousin did and he came back out all sorts of messed up. He was arrested for drugs. According to him, he spent the majority of his time in solitary confinement. For his safety, he said that his first couple of months there were okay, as far as prison goes. But that one day, for whatever reason, some guy who had been kept separate from the general population was accidentally put with the rest of the prisoners, unsupervised, and that a few prisoners grabbed the guy and that they stomped on his elbows and legs to break them before they sodomized him with some shivs. My cousin said that those guys did it all in an instant and that they threatened him if he snitched. My cousin was later interviewed by some of the guards before they took the guys who did this, and so some thought that he had snitched. He says that he didn't, but that didn't matter because the guards had put him in solitary for safety and was eventually kept there for months longer, because he wouldn't snitch, so they tried to accuse him of being an accomplice.
That would F me up. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. COs put you in ISO for being a part of it, according to them, while prisoners think you're in ISO to hide from them.
I made a friend early on who was sentenced to life for killing a man that had touched his niece. He'd been locked up for about 5 or 6 years when I'd first met him. Talked to him every day for 3 years, and one day he comes up to me and says he needs to talk to me about something. We do a lap on the back 40 and he tells me his old lady is leaving him, and isn't bringing his daughter up to come see him anymore. He's actually crying. I didn't know what I could do to help him, so I let him cry and told him to not let it bother him, maybe she'll come around. We go on about our day, and everything seems normal. That night he woke me up. He bunked across the hall crying. I got up to talk to him and he says he wants to die, and that he's glad I'm up because he doesn't want to be alone. I start hitting the panic button for my cell and screaming for a guard, but no one comes, and I have to watch while he pries his mirror off of his wall. He put on his linens and blanket like a big robe and he cuts his stomach with his mirror. It was hard to see much because of the blankets and the dark, but I could smell his blood. Then he lit his blankets on fire. The co's got there when the smoke alarm went off, but they were too late. I still have nightmares about it, screaming for him to stop, to just talk it out, but he never does. I've seen a lot of fucked up poop man, but this was probably the worst. Or, at least, it stuck with me the longest. Edit. Thanks for the hugs and support everyone. Makes how I feel after sharing hurt a little less. I appreciate it.
Damn, I am sorry dude. That's rough. Desperation when you don't think you have anything to live for.
Damn dude, at least the guy died with someone who cared. He had nothing to live for anymore. Sorry to hear that.
This is the absolute worst one in this thread. Jesus effing Christ, man.
Man. I hope you know you gave him comfort in his final moments and certainly did everything you could to stop him. Hell, you sound like a reason he may have stayed alive. Got a couple extra days. Have you talked to a professional about it? Just wanna make sure you're looking after yourself, cause this is one of the rougher comments psychologically I've seen in this thread, and sometimes that poop lingers in ways we don't even realize.
My uncle was in for 17 years for marijuana-related charges. He was in a ward with 2 other guys with the same name as him, both of them in for 7 years. One of them killed a guy and the other was a child molester. One day when my uncle was in the showers, a group of guys who mistaken him as a child molester were about to serve prison justice on the wrong guy. He quickly realized the situation, sprinted naked out the showers to grab his papers to show the guys they have the wrong dude.
17 years for marijuana and 7 years for molesting a child. That's fucked up.
There's something fucked about the sentences there.
Wait, your uncle was in prison for 17 years for pot? The other guys fondled kids and killed a person and they're only in for 7?
17 years for marijuana? Don't know much about this kind of thing, but what was he doing, supplying a small country?
Seeing someone on the threes jump to his death. Just missing PPL on the deck.
Saw a guy try to kill himself. The block only had 2 tiers. He walked up the stairs and the phones were right at the top. He grabbed the hook and used it to climb on top of the phone with the side railing. He then leaned over the rail holding the hook and fell back. He just broke his back and did the rest of his midlife in a wheelchair.
I spent 2 weeks awaiting trial in Johannesburg Central Prison. Saw a guy with mental issues get severely beaten one night after he attacked another inmate. Saw another guy have a kettle of boiling water poured over him another evening after an argument with another prisoner. In both cases the wardens did nothing until the following morning. I was lucky, I managed to avoid any issues while I was there. Overall a crappy experience. 010, would not recommend.
I did 3 years inside HMP Belmarsh when I was 18, having just transferred out of Uycookham Wood. I was in for a non-violent but serious offence, so I was put on HB1 with all the lifers. I saw a lot of poop go sideways quickly there, dudes having heads cracked in with pool balls out of nowhere in the lunch queue, but that all became pretty commonplace. What I will never forget is the feeling of surprise as 3 guys pushed past me on the stairs, and wonder what the hurry was. Then watching them all barrel into a single cell, still not sure what was going on. The screams that came from that room were horrific. It turns out they held down the guy, a big dude too, on his bed, threw boiling water on him and repeatedly stabbed him. We all heard the screams but no one would alert a guard. It isn't done. Then, from my spot on the stairs next to the cell, I watched a guard walk over. His name was Mr. Gebad. He saw what was going on through the window in the door. And turned around and walked off. C-word doesn't describe him well enough, edit, because some people seem to be defending him. Let me tell you what happened after. The guys ran off upstairs and flushed or chucked their razors and blood-stained clothes. Because Mr. Gebad didn't get close enough to ID anyone, they got nothing other than being put on basic. If he had opened the door they could have been positively ID'd. If the CCTV worked on the wing, they could have been ID'd. Mr. Gebad was one person in a string of safeguarding failures. Doesn't mean he isn't at fault too.